Hello everyone, and welcome. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us create more content like this. Today, we're going to explore a powerful and life-changing topic: how to use failure as fuel for growth, success, and personal development. We all experience failure at some point, in school, at work, in relationships, or even when trying something new. It's a universal part of life. Yet many people fear it, avoid it, or let it define them. In this story, you'll follow the journey of a young man named Ethan, who learns to transform his setbacks into opportunities and use his failure as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. Ethan was an ambitious, hard-working young man, full of dreams and aspirations, but he often found himself discouraged by setbacks. Every time a plan went wrong, he felt defeated, questioning his abilities and doubting his potential. He wished he could be more resilient, more confident, and able to bounce back from challenges. This story will follow him as he learns key lessons about mindset, persistence, reflection, and the strategies that turn failure into a powerful motivator. You'll see how one person's perspective can completely change the way they experience obstacles. Over the course of this story, you will witness Ethan facing multiple failures, from small mistakes to significant disappointments, and watch how he gradually discovers the mindset and habits that allow him to harness those failures, learn from them, and propel himself forward. The story will show you practical approaches to using setbacks as fuel for action, helping you understand that failure is not the end but often the beginning of growth and achievement. So, get ready to follow Ethan's journey, the moments of struggle, reflection, and insight, and discover how he gradually transforms each failure into energy, focus, and motivation. By the end, you'll see that failure doesn't have to hold you back. In fact, when approached correctly, it can push you further than any success ever could. Ethan's journey began on a chilly autumn morning. He had been preparing for a major presentation at his university, one that could significantly influence his future opportunities. Weeks of research, writing, and practice had gone into his project, and he felt ready, or so he thought. As he stepped into the lecture hall, confidence mingled with a subtle undercurrent of anxiety. The room was packed with students, professors, and visiting professionals. Ethan started speaking, articulating his ideas carefully, but within minutes, technical problems arose. The projector malfunctioned, and some of his carefully prepared slides wouldn't display. He felt a surge of panic and stumbled over his words. Questions from the audience became harder to answer, and his carefully rehearsed points seemed to scatter in his mind. By the time the presentation ended, Ethan felt humiliated. He left the lecture hall with a sinking feeling in his chest, replaying every mistake in his mind. "I failed," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. The disappointment was heavy, and he wondered if all his preparation had been wasted. That night, he went home and reflected on the day. At first, he felt defeated, imagining the judgment of others and the lost opportunity. But gradually, he began to notice something different: the lessons hidden within the experience. The technical failure had taught him to prepare for contingencies, to remain calm under pressure, and to improvise when things don't go as planned. The questions from the audience had revealed areas where he needed deeper understanding, pointing out gaps in his knowledge that he could now address. Ethan realized that failure, although painful, contained invaluable feedback. It was a mirror showing him what worked, what didn't, and what he could improve. Instead of seeing the event as the end of the road, he chose to see it as a starting point for growth. That night, he made a conscious decision: he would not let this setback define him. He would learn from it, adapt, and come back stronger. He wrote down the lessons from the day, focusing on actionable insights rather than self-criticism. This simple act of reflection began to shift his mindset. Failure was no longer something to fear, but a source of knowledge and motivation. In the days that followed, Ethan applied these insights. He practiced speaking in smaller, controlled environments, rehearsed answering unexpected questions, and developed backup plans for technical issues. Each practice session reminded him that failure wasn't a permanent state but a temporary obstacle, a signal to prepare, improve, and persist. He discovered that the energy he had once wasted on regret could be redirected into action and growth. By embracing failure, rather than avoiding it, Ethan began to feel a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. This experience taught him a crucial principle: failure is not the opposite of success, it is an essential part of it. Every misstep provides insight, every mistake offers guidance, and every setback presents an opportunity to grow. Ethan's first real encounter with significant failure had been uncomfortable, even painful, but it had also been transformative. He realized that the key to turning failure into fuel lay in reflection, learning, and the willingness to act again despite fear or disappointment. After his first major failure, Ethan felt a mix of determination and apprehension. He knew that he couldn't change what had happened, but he could control how he responded. Over the next few weeks, he deliberately sought opportunities to practice and test himself in situations that felt challenging. He started with small, manageable goals, like presenting in front of a few classmates or recording himself speaking on a difficult topic. Each attempt carried the risk of making mistakes, but Ethan embraced it. He remembered the lesson he had learned: failure wasn't something to avoid, it was information, a guide pointing him toward growth. One day, Ethan decided to apply for a competitive internship at a well-known company. The application process was rigorous, involving multiple rounds of interviews and problem-solving tasks. The first interview was intimidating. The panel asked questions he hadn't anticipated, and he stumbled on a few answers. As he left the room, the familiar sting of disappointment arose, but this time it was different. Instead of letting it crush his confidence, he analyzed what had gone wrong. He took careful notes, identified gaps in his knowledge, and reflected on his body language and tone. By the next day, he was already strategizing how to improve for the next round. Ethan began to see that each failure offered a roadmap for improvement. The earlier he reflected and acted on it, the faster he could grow. He realized that fear of failure had once paralyzed him, making even small challenges seem insurmountable. Now, he reframed fear as a signal, an opportunity to prepare, adjust, and perform better next time. The energy that would have gone into worrying or self-pity was redirected into learning, practicing, and taking decisive steps forward. In the following weeks, Ethan faced multiple rejections and setbacks. Some applications were unsuccessful, some projects didn't yield the results he hoped for. But he no longer viewed these as defeats. Each time, he documented the lessons he could take away, what he could do differently, what skills needed strengthening, and how to approach similar situations in the future. Over time, these reflections became a habit. He started to see failure as a powerful feedback loop, one that accelerated his growth faster than comfort and success ever could. Ethan also discovered the importance of perspective. He talked with mentors, friends, and colleagues, seeking advice and observing how others handled setbacks. He noticed a pattern: successful people didn't avoid failure, they used it as a stepping stone. This realization reinforced his commitment to embrace challenges fully, knowing that mistakes were essential to the process of learning, improving, and achieving long-term goals. By the end of this period, Ethan's confidence had grown. He still experienced fear and discomfort, but he had learned to act despite them. He was no longer defined by his failures, he was defined by his response to them. The lessons he extracted from each setback became fuel, driving him to prepare, practice, and perform at a higher level than he had before. Ethan began to understand that failure was not an enemy, but a teacher, and that the courage to learn from mistakes was the secret to building resilience, skill, and true progress. Several months had passed since Ethan's first major failure, and he had begun to notice subtle but powerful changes in himself. He approached challenges with a newfound mindset. Setbacks were opportunities, mistakes were lessons, and fear was a signal to prepare rather than retreat. One afternoon, Ethan faced a particularly daunting task: delivering a presentation to a group of industry professionals who had far more experience than he did. The stakes were high, and the pressure was immense. But this time, instead of panic, he felt a quiet focus. He had practiced, reflected on previous failures, and prepared for unexpected problems. He understood that mistakes might happen, and he had a plan for recovering from them. As he began to speak, a technical issue arose: a slide wouldn't load correctly. In the past, this would have thrown him off completely. Today, however, Ethan stayed calm. He paused, made a joke to ease tension, and continued explaining his points without relying on the faulty slide. His audience responded positively, and he realized that his ability to handle failure with composure had grown dramatically. Each past setback had prepared him for this moment, teaching him resilience, adaptability, and the value of preparation. After the presentation, Ethan received constructive feedback from the professionals. Some points highlighted areas for improvement, and others praised his ability to stay composed under pressure. Instead of feeling discouraged by the critiques, he welcomed them. Each piece of feedback became fuel for his next step. He understood that every failure, small or large, was a chance to gather information, adjust strategies, and improve performance. This mindset transformed the way he approached both professional and personal challenges. Over the next few weeks, Ethan applied the same principle in multiple areas of his life. He joined a competitive sports team, pushed himself to tackle new responsibilities at school, and experimented with creative projects that had intimidated him before. In every situation, he expected mistakes and setbacks, but he no longer feared them. Instead, he focused on learning from every experience. Failures became a source of energy, motivating him to practice more, research deeper, and act with greater intention. Ethan also began mentoring others who struggled with fear of failure. Sharing his experiences reinforced his own lessons and gave him perspective on how universal setbacks were. He encouraged peers to embrace mistakes, analyze them, and use them as fuel rather than allowing them to become obstacles. Through teaching others, he internalized the truth he had discovered: failure only has power if we let it define us. By changing our perspective, we can convert disappointment into opportunity and fear into motivation. By the end of this period, Ethan had transformed the way he approached life. He no longer avoided challenges, and he no longer feared mistakes. Each failure was simply data, information to help him grow, improve, and prepare for the next challenge. He realized that resilience was built not in moments of comfort but in moments of adversity, and that the courage to act despite potential failure was what separated those who stagnated from those who achieved remarkable growth. Ethan's journey was still ongoing, but he now understood a vital principle: failure, when approached correctly, is the most powerful fuel for personal and professional success. A few weeks later, Ethan encountered one of the most challenging obstacles he had faced so far. He had been working tirelessly on a personal project, a research study he hoped to present at a national conference. He invested countless hours into gathering data, analyzing results, and drafting his findings. The night before submission, Ethan reviewed everything meticulously, believing he had done his best. However, when he submitted his work, he received a message from the committee: his paper had been rejected. At first, Ethan felt a surge of disappointment and frustration. He replayed every detail in his mind, questioning whether he had overlooked something or whether he simply wasn't good enough. For a moment, the old feelings of defeat threatened to resurface. But then, Ethan paused and reflected. He remembered all the lessons he had learned about failure: that setbacks are not the end, but a source of feedback, and that resilience comes from analyzing mistakes and using them as motivation to improve. He took a deep breath and carefully reviewed the committee's feedback. They had praised his ideas but pointed out areas where methodology could be stronger and conclusions clearer. Instead of dwelling on the rejection, he treated it as a roadmap for growth. Each comment became actionable insight, a guide for how to refine his work and make it stronger. Ethan dedicated the next few days to revising his research. He sought advice from mentors, reviewed additional resources, and practiced presenting his findings more clearly. Each revision required patience, focus, and humility, skills he had begun to cultivate through previous experiences with failure. He realized that rejection, although painful, provided him with clarity and direction he might not have discovered otherwise. What initially felt like a setback had become an opportunity to enhance his skills, deepen his understanding, and improve the quality of his work. Throughout this process, Ethan noticed a shift in his mindset. He no longer internalized failure as a reflection of his worth or intelligence. Instead, he treated it as an essential part of learning, a stepping stone toward mastery. Every misstep, critique, or obstacle became fuel, motivating him to act, experiment, and grow. The energy he once spent worrying or feeling ashamed was now redirected into focused effort, reflection, and improvement. This shift not only strengthened his resilience but also made his successes more meaningful, because he knew they were built upon lessons learned from previous failures. By the time he completed the revised version of his research, Ethan felt more confident than ever. He submitted it again, this time with a clearer methodology, stronger analysis, and polished presentation. The act of turning failure into fuel had transformed his approach entirely. He realized that setbacks were not enemies to be feared, but essential teachers, guiding him toward better performance and greater personal growth. Each failure now carried value, shaping him into a more capable, resourceful, and determined person. Ethan also noticed a ripple effect in his daily life. By embracing failure, he approached other challenges with courage and curiosity. He tackled assignments, competitions, and personal goals with the mindset that mistakes were simply part of the process. The fear that once paralyzed him had diminished, replaced by a sense of empowerment. Each obstacle, each misstep, and each critique became a source of motivation, proving that failure, when embraced and analyzed, could be the most powerful catalyst for improvement and success. As the months went by, Ethan faced increasingly complex challenges that tested not only his skills but also his mindset. One of the most defining moments came when he joined a collaborative project with a team of highly skilled peers. The project required creativity, precision, and constant problem-solving. From the very beginning, obstacles appeared. Ideas clashed, technical issues arose, and deadlines loomed dangerously close. In the past, these situations might have overwhelmed him, triggering self-doubt and procrastination. This time, however, Ethan approached the challenges differently. He saw each difficulty as an opportunity to learn and a chance to use setbacks as fuel for growth. During one particularly stressful meeting, a major portion of the project failed during a demonstration. Ethan's initial reaction was surprise, but he quickly reminded himself that the situation wasn't a reflection of his abilities. It was an opportunity to identify what went wrong and find solutions. He gathered the team, analyzed the issue step by step, and proposed an alternative approach. Instead of dwelling on the failure, he focused on actionable solutions. His response inspired others on the team, and they collectively worked through the problem. By the end of the day, not only had they resolved the issue, but the team also felt more cohesive and confident. Ethan realized that failure could strengthen relationships, teamwork, and resilience when approached constructively. This period also taught him the importance of reflection and self-assessment. Each setback prompted Ethan to ask critical questions. What can I control? What can I learn? How can I adapt? He learned to separate his self-worth from the outcome, understanding that failure didn't diminish his value. Instead, mistakes were data points, tools to improve decision-making, refine skills, and build a stronger foundation for future endeavors. He began journaling regularly, documenting failures, lessons learned, and strategies to apply next time. This process reinforced the habit of turning setbacks into fuel, making reflection an active component of his growth. Ethan also noticed a profound shift in his energy and motivation. Tasks that once seemed intimidating now carried a sense of curiosity and challenge. He approached them with the mindset, even if I fail, I gained something valuable. This perspective reduced fear and procrastination while increasing his confidence and creativity. Each obstacle became a test, a puzzle to solve, and a chance to apply what he had learned from past failures. The failures themselves became stepping stones, each one bringing him closer to mastery and achievement. Through these experiences, Ethan discovered another critical insight: failure is contagious only if you let it be. Witnessing setbacks could either paralyze or motivate, depending on perspective. By choosing to view mistakes as opportunities, he maintained momentum even when progress seemed slow. His resilience became a habit, his response to adversity deliberate, and his mindset increasingly unshakable. He realized that the most successful people weren't those who avoided failure, but those who learned to harness it, analyze it, and use it as fuel to drive higher levels of performance and personal growth. By the end of this intense period, Ethan had transformed not just his abilities but his entire approach to life. He understood that setbacks were inevitable, but defeat was optional. Each failure contained the seeds of progress, and by nurturing them through reflection, learning, and action, he could turn challenges into opportunities, mistakes into lessons, and disappointments into motivation. The young man who once feared failure had become someone who thrived on it, using every obstacle as fuel to achieve more than he ever imagined possible. The following months brought Ethan into even more challenging situations that tested his resilience and determination. One of the most pivotal experiences occurred when he decided to enter a national competition in his field, a contest that drew the most talented and ambitious individuals from across the country. The preparation required rigorous research, countless practice sessions, and a level of discipline that pushed him beyond his comfort zone. Ethan knew there was a very real possibility of failure, but he saw this not as a threat, but as a unique opportunity to learn, grow, and challenge himself. The mindset he had cultivated over the past months guided him. Every potential mistake was fuel for improvement, and every setback was an instruction to refine his approach. During the competition, Ethan encountered obstacles he had never faced before. Technical errors occurred, questions from judges were unexpected, and time pressures were intense. For a moment, he felt the old fear of failure creeping in, but he consciously reminded himself of how far he had come. Drawing on his past experiences, he stayed focused, adapted quickly, and used the energy from the mistakes he made to stay sharper and more deliberate in his responses. Each setback became a prompt for greater creativity, deeper focus, and more effective problem-solving. He realized that failure didn't weaken him, it activated a different kind of energy, one that motivated him to act with clarity, courage, and precision. By the end of the competition, Ethan did not win first place. The initial wave of disappointment was familiar, but he quickly shifted perspective. He analyzed the entire process, identifying what went well and what could be improved. Every error, every misstep, and every unexpected challenge provided actionable insights. What might have felt like defeat to someone else became a roadmap for his next attempt. He had gained valuable experience, strengthened his resilience, and discovered new ways to approach complex challenges. In this way, failure had not diminished his progress, it had accelerated it. In the weeks following the competition, Ethan applied the lessons he had learned to other areas of his life. He approached personal projects with renewed confidence, experimented with creative ideas he had previously avoided, and sought opportunities that once intimidated him. He discovered that failure, when embraced and examined, could fuel personal growth far more effectively than success ever could. Each experience reinforced a simple truth: setbacks are not endpoints. They are catalysts for reflection, learning, and deliberate action. Ethan also noticed the effect of this mindset on his relationships and teamwork. By modeling resilience and a constructive response to failure, he inspired others around him to face challenges with courage and curiosity. He encouraged his peers to see mistakes as tools rather than threats, and he shared strategies for analyzing failures and converting them into lessons. In teaching others, Ethan reinforced his own learning and deepened his understanding of the value of setbacks. By now, Ethan's approach to life had fundamentally changed. He no longer feared failure, avoided challenges, or hesitated in the face of difficulty. Instead, he had developed a mindset that viewed obstacles as opportunities, setbacks as teachers, and mistakes as fuel. He had discovered that the ability to act despite fear, learn from mistakes, and persist with deliberate effort was more important than any single victory. Ethan's journey had transformed failure from a source of discouragement into a powerful engine of personal and professional growth. Following the national competition, Ethan began to notice the long-term impact of his transformed mindset. He realized that every failure he had encountered, every rejection, and every unexpected challenge had collectively shaped his abilities, resilience, and confidence. He approached each new day with a sense of curiosity and readiness, knowing that mistakes were not setbacks but opportunities for refinement. Ethan started applying this mindset to more ambitious goals. Projects that once intimidated him now seemed approachable, because he had learned to treat failure as fuel rather than a threat. One such challenge was an entrepreneurial initiative he had dreamed about for years. Ethan had an idea for a small business project that required research, planning, and networking. As he began, he encountered immediate obstacles. Potential partners hesitated, initial projections were off, and some strategies failed spectacularly. Many people in his position might have given up, but Ethan used the setbacks as guidance. He analyzed each failure, understood the lessons hidden within, and quickly iterated his plans. What once would have caused fear and hesitation now energized him. He recognized that every obstacle clarified what needed to be improved and where he could focus his energy most effectively. In addition to professional pursuits, Ethan applied this approach to personal development. He tackled skills he had previously avoided, from public speaking to learning new software. Each time he stumbled or failed, he carefully reflected on the experience, adjusted his methods, and tried again. Through repetition, analysis, and persistence, he grew more capable and confident. Failures were no longer discouraging. They were data points, feedback mechanisms, and fuel for improvement. He noticed that even small mistakes, when examined thoughtfully, provided valuable insights that compounded into significant growth over time. Ethan also began mentoring younger students and peers, sharing his philosophy of using failure as a catalyst. He emphasized the importance of mindset, reflection, and deliberate action. Through teaching, he reinforced his own understanding and inspired others to embrace their mistakes rather than fear them. He saw how this approach created a ripple effect. When one person learns to transform failure into fuel, it influences those around them, fostering a culture of growth, experimentation, and resilience. By the end of this period, Ethan had developed an unshakable sense of confidence rooted not in perfection, but in experience. He knew setbacks were inevitable, but he also knew that his response to them would determine his trajectory. Failure no longer dictated his emotions, it guided his actions. He had discovered a principle that would serve him for life. Setbacks are the raw material of growth, mistakes are stepping stones, and resilience is built through deliberate reflection and persistent effort. Ethan's journey had transformed him from someone who feared failure into someone who thrived on it, using each obstacle as fuel to reach higher, act bolder, and achieve more than he ever thought possible. Ethan's journey was approaching a turning point. By now, he had faced countless failures, some small, others significant, and had learned to use each as fuel for improvement. But the next challenge would test him like never before. He had been invited to lead a high-profile team project with far-reaching consequences for his future career. The responsibility was enormous, and the stakes were higher than anything he had encountered before. Ethan knew that mistakes could be costly, but he also recognized that the lessons he had accumulated over the years had prepared him for this moment. Failure was no longer an enemy, it was a tool, a guide, and a source of energy. As the project progressed, Ethan and his team encountered repeated obstacles. Deadlines were tight, team members disagreed on key decisions, and unexpected technical issues arose at critical moments. Each setback could have undermined morale and led to chaos, but Ethan approached each problem systematically. He encouraged the team to analyze failures objectively, learn from them, and implement solutions quickly. Instead of frustration or blame, he modeled composure, resilience, and a proactive attitude. This approach not only helped the project stay on track but also inspired his colleagues to adopt the same mindset, turning potential setbacks into collaborative problem-solving opportunities. During one particularly intense week, a major deliverable failed quality checks, threatening to derail the entire project. In the past, Ethan might have panicked or become paralyzed by self-doubt. Now, he took a deep breath, assessed the situation, and treated the failure as a roadmap for immediate action. He broke down the problem into manageable tasks, delegated responsibilities based on strengths, and worked tirelessly to implement solutions. The energy that might have been spent worrying was transformed into focus, creativity, and determination. By approaching failure as fuel, Ethan not only solved the problem but also strengthened the team's cohesion and resilience. As the project neared completion, Ethan reflected on the journey. Each previous failure, the rejected paper, the failed presentations, the missteps in smaller projects, had built the skills, mindset, and confidence necessary to navigate this high-pressure environment. He realized that failure wasn't just a part of the process, it was the engine driving his growth. Every misstep had been a lesson, every disappointment a push toward improvement, and every critique a guide to becoming more capable. By embracing setbacks and learning from them, Ethan had transformed challenges into opportunities for personal and professional development. The final presentation of the project was a success, not because everything went perfectly, but because Ethan and his team had learned to anticipate problems, respond effectively, and use failures as fuel to improve every step of the way. Ethan now understood fully that success is built on the foundation of repeated failures, each one offering insights, growth, and resilience. By the end of this chapter, he had mastered the principle that failure, when approached with reflection, courage, and action, becomes the most powerful catalyst for achievement and personal development. Ethan's journey had come full circle. The young man who once feared failure, avoided challenges, and questioned his own abilities had transformed into someone who saw setbacks as the most powerful fuel for growth. Looking back on everything he had experienced, the failed presentations, rejected papers, technical mishaps, and unexpected obstacles, he realized that each failure had played a critical role in shaping the person he had become. Every setback had provided lessons, insights, and opportunities that he could never have gained through success alone. He now understood that failure was not something to avoid, and certainly not something to fear. It was a tool, a teacher, and a source of energy that could propel him toward personal and professional growth. By analyzing mistakes, learning from them, and acting with deliberate focus, Ethan had learned to transform disappointment into motivation, hesitation into action, and challenges into opportunities. The process of failing, reflecting, and improving had become a habit, and this habit had built a foundation of resilience, confidence, and competence that no success alone could provide. Ethan also recognized the ripple effect of his journey. By sharing his experiences with peers, mentoring others, and modeling a constructive response to setbacks, he had influenced those around him to view challenges differently. People began to see that failure did not define them. How they responded to failure did. This insight created a culture of growth and experimentation, where mistakes were valued as lessons, and setbacks became catalysts for improvement. Ultimately, Ethan had discovered a universal truth: the path to success is rarely linear, and failure is not the enemy. Instead, failure is a necessary component of growth, a compass guiding us toward improvement, and a source of fuel that, when harnessed, can drive us to levels of achievement far beyond what we might imagine. By embracing this principle, Ethan transformed not just his approach to challenges, but his entire life. As he continued on his journey, Ethan faced new challenges with courage, curiosity, and confidence. Each obstacle became an opportunity, each misstep a lesson, and each setback a source of energy to propel him forward. He had learned that failure is not the end of the road but the beginning of growth, and that the courage to act, reflect, and improve is what separates those who achieve from those who merely dream. Ethan's story is a testament to the power of using failure as fuel, and a reminder that every challenge we encounter carries within it the seeds of progress, growth, and success.